With all the talks that are taking place between Presidents Trump, Putin, Zelensky, European leaders, there is a story right in the middle of all of this regarding Ukrainian children that has been, for the most part, totally overlooked, at least by most of the mainstream media outlets. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine 3.5 years ago, thousands of Ukrainian children have reportedly been abducted by Kremlin forces and taken into Russia, where many of them have been given new identities and new families. Ukraine is saying that their reports are somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 missing children. Well, at the same time, a Yale University humanitarian research group is estimating those numbers could be as many as 35,000 children from Ukraine may be being held in Russia and Russian-occupied territories. So as the U.S. continues its efforts to broker an end to the Russia-Ukraine war, where will these children fit in? Well, with me now to discuss this is Chelsea Sobolik. She's the Director of Government Relations at World Relief. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me, Congressman.
Okay. I'm still, when I first heard this, I was just devastated to think of it, but thousands of children abducted. How in the world did this happen?
It's a great question, and I'm so grateful for you guys shining a light on this story. And Family Research Council has been at the forefront of helping lead out on bringing awareness to this incredibly important issue. So I'm very grateful for that. So a number of things. Russia is claiming that that they're the humanitarians, that they're the ones coming and helping these vulnerable children find new homes, and they are taking care of them. They're sending them to summer camps. What is actually happening could not be further from what Russia is saying. Russia is illegally abducting thousands. You said 20,000. It could be upwards, 30, 35,000. Thousands of vulnerable Ukrainian children. They're subjecting them to military training, political re-education, and illegal forced adoption. All of this is highly illegal according to international law. All of this should matter to Americans and should matter to Christians because we believe in the importance and value of family. So there have been a number of efforts over the years since the war broke out to bring this front and center. And last week during the Alaska summit, President Trump delivered a letter from the First Lady, Melania Trump, on behalf of the vulnerable children. So we were incredibly grateful for his willingness to raise it with President Putin, and then for Melania's willingness also to send that letter. But it's truly bone chilling. I'm a mom of a little boy. I can't begin to fathom what I would be feeling and thinking if my child was illegally abducted during a time of conflict.
Yeah, exactly. So a twofold question here. Do we have any idea, I guess there's got to be some indication of the age of these children? What are we looking at? The age ranges here. And secondly, how in the world can Russia say they are the humanitarian ones here when they are abducting children, taking them from their families and giving them new identities, indoctrinating? I mean, this whole thing is mind-boggling. So, sorry, twofold question: the age group, and how in the world is Russia trying to get away with their excuse for their?
Yeah, well, Russia is lying through their teeth about this. And the global community, the international community, has confirmed that. There have been statement after statement after statement. There's a bipartisan resolution in Congress right now, led by Chuck Grassley and Don Bacon in the House, calling what is happening to the children an atrocity. It's illegal. It's wrong. Russia's lying through its teeth. And the global community is watching and paying attention and calling out what they're doing to the vulnerable children. As far as ages, as young as just a couple months old, all the way up to 18. I've actually chatted with a young man who's now a legal adult, but he was 15, 16 and was subjected to military training in Russia. And I've chatted with his mom and got to hear what it was like for her. So very, very young to teenage boys being subjected to military training.
Is there concern? Well, I know there's concern, but is there legitimate concern with evidence backing it up that some of these children are being marketed for adoption for sex trafficking, for example, or something else nefarious, or is this just coerced adoption? I actually heard there's even an online catalog of these children. What are these children facing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll just make this point. It is always the most vulnerable that pay the heaviest price during war and conflict. And who is the most vulnerable among us? It's children who their voices are not heard in Washington, D.C. And so that's why I'm so grateful to get to do this work, to bring their stories and their voices into the halls of power. And you're right, there is an online catalog where people can select, I want a child with blue eyes, which is, again, very, very bone chilling. There are a number of international laws, like the Geneva Convention on the Rights of the Child, that govern how children are to be handled during times of war and conflict. And for Russia to illegally abduct across a border a child, much less subject them to a forced adoption. They're changing their paperwork, changing their names. It's all highly, highly illegal. These are children, some of which do have families in Ukraine, some of which don't have families. They were living in institutionalized care outside the care of the family. What's important to note is those children belong in their homeland, which is Ukraine. They don't belong in Russia, which has attacked Ukraine. They belong in their homeland, and they belong, even if they don't have family, even if they are a very vulnerable child, they belong in their homeland where members of their community can step in and help care for them.
Chelsea, you mentioned that the identity. Okay, so the identity changes, all sorts of things. I mean, these kids are evidently just being made to become Russian, for lack of a better expression of it all. Is there now any possibility of tracking these children down?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a really important question. So that Yale University humanitarian lab that you mentioned has been actively engaged since the outbreak of the war for years, systematically documenting and tracing the children. It's very complex. It's not my particular skill set, but there are people who are trained in this, who are documenting and tracking what's happening to the children. And there are groups who are doing rescue efforts. It's small scale. It's a couple children here, a couple dozen children here. It's very small scale. It's not at the scale that we've been asking for, which is full return of all the children in a peace negotiation, which is what we are asking for and continuing to ask for. But the Yale University is actively tracking and documenting to the best of their ability. And that's why it's so important that the whole of government pays attention to this, because they are changing names and identities. They're not just physically moving a child across a border. They're not just subjecting a child to political re-education. They're erasing their identity and giving them a new one.
Unbelievable. All right, Chelsea, two more real quick questions, and then I want to switch over to my other guests real quickly. But this past spring, your organization led a letter to prominent faith leaders, to President Trump, as well as Secretary of State Rubio, about this situation and these Ukrainian children who are being abducted. What kind of developments have there been since you sent that letter?
Yeah, so we sent the letter, and within less than a week, we actually met with some senior officials at the State Department. FRC was well represented at that meeting, so I was very grateful for the quick response to that. And the administration is aware of this issue. They've been aware of this issue for months. But the most recent development is in the recent summit at Alaska that President Trump did hand deliver a letter from the First Lady of the United States, raising this issue of vulnerable missing children. And we are so grateful. We actually sent her and the president a letter today from a number of the same faith leaders who signed that letter, thanking them. It's so important that they know that we're grateful that people of faith care about vulnerable children, because Scripture cares, and God, the heartbeat of God cares about vulnerable children. So we met with senior officials at the State Department. So grateful that the president did raise this at the highest level in his meeting with President Putin. And I think next steps, we're continuing to encourage this administration, encourage the global community to not forget about the kids. That in a peace negotiation, in a peace deal, that the children's quick and safe return is one of the top priorities. So again, so grateful for the president and the first lady for being willing to raise this issue.
And thank you for taking that role. Real quickly, final question. How can our viewers and listeners engage in this process and bring further attention to it real quickly?
What a great question. First and foremost, I would encourage everyone to pray for the children, pray for wisdom for those engaging in these important peace conversations. Thank the president and the first lady for raising this issue. And then congressional engagement. There's bicameral, bipartisan resolutions calling what's happening to the children out. And so grateful for Senator Chuck Grassley's leadership, Representative Don Bacon's leadership. So if you want to call your member of Congress, call them and encourage them to co-sponsor that resolution.
Thank you so much, Chelsea Sobolik, Director of Government Relations at World Relief. Thanks for taking the lead in this, and thank you for joining us today on Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me.